Crime and Crime Again discusses true crime content that may be graphic or disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Born August 19, 1995, Elijah Runningbear Diaz was the middle child of three, born to father Stephen and mother Leilani. When Bear was 5 years old, his mother separated from his father, and she moved her three children back to the Barona Reservation, where she grew up, about 30 miles northeast of San Diego, California. Their family are members of the Barona Band of Mission Indians, from the Barona Reservation, which was established in 1932. When Bear was 6 years old, he started showing abnormal and alarming symptoms of a serious health condition. Typically an energetic and adventurous child, Bear started feeling lethargic, always exhausted for no obvious reason. He would experience frequent headaches, and eventually he began vomiting frequently. During one of many hospital stays, to try to determine what was going on with Bear, doctors made a diagnosis. Bear's blood sugar was 863. A normal blood sugar level for someone without diabetes is between 80 and 120. Bear was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at 6 years old. Leilani recalls the doctors being shocked that Bear was still conscious at that point. They would have expected him to have already gone into a diabetic coma with such high blood sugar. From that point on, Bear would have to take insulin 3 times a day. When Bear was 8 years old, his mother Leilani married Donald Thompson, who already had 5 children of his own. Donald's second oldest son, Jacob, became particularly close with Bear, despite a significant age difference. The two developed a special brotherly bond almost immediately. During the course of just 1 year, from the time Bear was 8 until around age 9, he was hospitalized for diabetic complications at least 7 times, each hospital stay lasting a week or more. But Bear never wanted to let his diagnosis slow him down. From age 10 to about 15, his adventurous spirit never faltered. Bear loved surfing and dirt biking, and he became a talented guitar player. As he got older, it became increasingly difficult for Bear to stay active and live a normal life. The lengthy hospital stays alone made school challenging for Bear, and eventually his mother made the decision to allow him to leave school and get his GED. After he turned 18, things started to take a positive turn for Bear. On the Barona Reservation is a casino, the profits of which all go back to the tribe. Tribal members over 18 receive monthly checks. For those under 18, their checks would go straight into a trust fund each month until they turned 18. Bear's trust fund had accumulated enough money by the time he was 18 for him to purchase his own home in cash, with no mortgage. He continued receiving these monthly checks and was able to live a rather comfortable life. I do want to take a moment to address the idea that all natives in the United States receive substantial or even just moderately adequate checks from the government every month. This is a myth. There are some tribes, such as Bears, who operate casinos on their reservations and put the profit from these casinos back toward tribal members, which is exactly what the Barona Reservation does. For Bear to have been able to purchase his own home with the trust fund money he received for 18 years from the casino, that particular casino had to have been quite successful. This is not the norm. The reality is that a staggering number of natives in the United States live below the poverty line on reservations. There are no real reparations being made toward natives, whether financial or by returning land to tribes. The notion that natives in this country live large off of monthly government checks is 100% incorrect. Bear purchased his home in El Cajon, California, just over 20 minutes away from the Barona Reservation where he had grown up. He was also able to purchase himself a brand new Jeep. His adult life was looking as though it was starting out on a high note. Bear was also incredibly generous with his home and his money. He would often help family and friends if they needed it, and he almost always had friends living with him or even just sleeping on his couch because they needed a place to stay. Bear's social circle was rather wide. He and his friends often gathered at a local hookah lounge, and it seemed as though Bear always had multiple people at his house. On BringBearHome.com, Leilani says, quote, "Eventually the people in and out of his home were beyond his control," end quote. By August of 2015, when Bear was 20 years old, his complications with diabetes were becoming debilitating. He was suffering from a form of diabetic neuropathy. High blood sugar can eventually damage nerves in the body, which is what neuropathy is. One of the most severe symptoms of neuropathy are recurring ulcers and infections on the feet. The sores and wounds on Bear's feet had become so severe and painful that Bear was unable to walk without crutches, and he could not operate a vehicle. In the episode of Disappeared that covered Bear's case, his mother Leilani noted that amputation was becoming a possibility. He relied mostly on Leilani to get from place to place, including 2 to 3 doctor's appointments each week. Leilani would spend anywhere from 5 to 8 hours each day with Bear, tending to his wounds and ensuring that he could get where he needed to go. Bear had fallen into a dark place, mentally and emotionally. He was suffering physically, and had been for a long time. It was taking a toll on his mental health. According to Bear's best friend, Jack, in the Disappeared episode, quote, "Sometimes he would just lay there all day, and then be up all night," end quote. Another contributor to his worsening depression was the loss he had experienced less than a year before. Jacob, Bear's stepbrother with whom he shared an incredibly close bond, had completed suicide, and the impact on Bear was devastating. His physical complications were bringing him almost to the point of being disabled. The neuropathy was not only causing foot ulcers and infections, but also causing his body to ache constantly. He was underweight and lethargic, and growing weary of the multiple daily insulin injections. He was frustrated with his immobility. Bear had also developed cataracts, and there was a growing possibility of eventually losing his eyesight. According to his family and friends, Bear had begun to withdraw from his typically active social life. In the Disappeared episode, Leilani says, quote, "He wasn't comfortable, he wasn't happy, he didn't want people to see him like that," end quote. On August 29, 2015, Leilani attended a funeral with the rest of her family. Bear remained at home. He was exhausted and needed to rest. After the funeral, Leilani called Bear, and he said that he wanted her to come pick him up so he could get out of the house. Around 10 p.m. on August 29, 2015, Leilani brought Bear back to his home in El Cajon. Leilani recalled that Bear had been in poor spirits most of the day. When they returned to his house, she went inside with him to try to talk to him and offer him some encouragement. She tried to remind him that the wounds on his feet were starting to heal, and suggested that he enroll in college to try to make some new friends. Leilani hoped that the idea of furthering his education might give Bear a new sense of drive or purpose. Unfortunately, Bear had already been struggling mentally and emotionally that day. He had been agitated and frustrated with his circumstances. He didn't take his mother's advice well, and he became combative. Leilani recalled, quote, "He yelled at me a lot that night," end quote. Though upset by Bear's reaction, Leilani understood where his anger and frustration was coming from. She decided to give him some space, so she left his house and drove home. Around 11:19 p.m., she texted Bear to let him know that she had made it home safely, and he immediately responded, quote, "Okay, Mom, I love you," end quote. The next morning, Leilani texted Bear to ask how he was feeling and what he wanted for lunch, but Bear didn't respond, which was extremely unusual. After a few hours with no response from Bear, Leilani decided to drive to his house to see if maybe he was just still sleeping. When she pulled in, she noticed that his car was still in the driveway. Because Leilani was essentially his primary caretaker, she did have a key to his home, so she let herself inside. Once inside, she tried to go to Bear's bedroom but realized that his door was locked, so she opened his bedroom door, but Bear wasn't there. Her immediate fear was that Bear had harmed himself. She knew that he was struggling with depression due to his own circumstances, as well as still grieving the loss of his stepbrother. She searched Bear's room frantically, hoping to find any clue as to where he had gone. There were several things about the state of his bedroom that Leilani found unsettling. The comforter and sheets had been stripped off of Bear's bed and were nowhere to be found. A pillow and another blanket were strewn on the floor by the bed. His 50-inch TV was missing. His backpack containing his wallet and medical supplies was gone, along with his crutches. It was estimated that Bear only had about 2 weeks' worth of medical supplies in his backpack. Leilani knew that Bear had around $7,000 in his safe, and it was all gone. When Bear's permanent roommates were questioned, one of them stated that they had come home around 2:30 a.m., and Bear's bedroom door was closed, which was typical. They stated that they hadn't seen Bear at all the night before. Leilani continued trying to call and text Bear but never received a response. The next day, August 30th, 2015, Bear was scheduled for a doctor's appointment. Being his caretaker, Leilani knew what time Bear was supposed to be there, so she arrived at the appointment hoping that her son would be there also. But he never showed up. This truly brought Leilani's worst fears to life, and at this point, she confirmed to herself that something was seriously wrong. Bear never missed his doctor's appointments. He knew how important they were in trying to keep him healthy and help him manage his diabetes. That day, Leilani went with Bear's sister Miranda to file a missing persons report. Police took her report, but also made it a point to tell her that her son was probably just off with his friends, and that he was an adult who legally didn't have to alert anyone when he was leaving. Basically, Leilani was told that they were not yet going to file the missing persons report. Bear had sometimes gone away for a couple of weeks at a time, but he never went off the radar, and always kept in contact with his mother. 1 week after Bear disappeared, the annual powwow at the Barona reservation was held. This was something that Bear never missed, but he didn't show up to the powwow either. He also never picked up his monthly check from the Barona casino, which was concerning. He always picked up his check on time. When police did start investigating Bear's disappearance, they discovered that around 1:29 a.m. on August 30th, 2015, just a couple of hours after his mother had last seen him, his cell phone pinged off of the tower near the Barona casino on the reservation. About 29 minutes later, his phone pinged off of a tower in the Santa Isabel area, about 40 miles northeast of Bear's home in El Cajon. And that is where the search for Bear came to a halt. There were no other indications as to where he went that night or who he was with. Even Bear's home could offer no further clues in his disappearance. There were far too many people in and out of his home on a frequent basis to make any clear determination about individuals who could have had something to do with his disappearance. Fingerprints from multiple different people were everywhere in the home. There was a constant flow of visitors and overnight guests. What is most clear about Bear's case is that it would have been physically impossible for him to leave on his own that night. He was weak, in constant pain, and couldn't walk without crutches, nor could he drive because of the wounds on his feet. There is simply no way that Bear could have carried a 50-inch TV out of his home by himself, and because his vehicle was still in the driveway, someone had to have taken Bear in another vehicle. Bear's father, Stephen, passed away unexpectedly in May 2016, 9 months after his son disappeared. Leilani was eventually granted legal conservatorship over Bear's home, and after asking the roommates to move out, his home became the headquarters for his case. Leilani continues to work with family, friends, and other volunteers in her diligent search for her son. Elijah Runningbear Diaz was last seen at his home in El Cajon, California, around 10:30 p.m. on August 29, 2015. At the time of his disappearance, Bear was 20 years old, 5 foot 9 inches tall, and approximately 110 pounds. He would now be 25 years old. Bear is Indigenous, from the Barona band of Mission Indians. He has a bear claw tattoo on his inner left forearm. Bear has type 1 diabetes and is insulin dependent. At the time of his disappearance, he only had an estimated 2 weeks' worth of medical supplies with him. At the time, he also had severe sores and wounds on his feet and could not walk without crutches. There is a $50,000 reward for information leading to Bear's whereabouts. If you have any information about the disappearance of Elijah Runningbear Diaz, please contact San Diego Crime Stoppers at 888-580-8477. You can also contact Leilani's search team directly by email at tip@bringbearhome.com. If you enjoy the show, please do consider leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps out with the visibility of the show. If you don't listen on Apple Podcasts but you would still like to leave a review, you can do that on Podchaser by searching Crime and Crime Again. I will also link it in the show notes. If you'd like to show monetary support for the show, you can do so on Buy Me a Coffee, where you can make a one-time donation less than the price of 1 cup of coffee. I will also leave that link in the show notes. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at CrimeAgainPod, Instagram at CrimeAgainPodcast, on Facebook, Crime and Crime Again Podcast, and on TikTok at Crime Again Podcast. There is also a Facebook discussion group, which I will link in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode of Crime and Crime Again.